Next month marks the 10-year anniversary of the deadliest wildfire in modern history, the Yarnell Fire in Arizona. A hotshot crew is desperate with flames closing in. As a last resort, they need to deploy their fire shelters, portable tent-like blankets designed to save your life when there's no other option.
We are preparing a deployment site, and I'll give you a call when we are under the shelters.
That was the last transmission from the team. 19 elite firefighters died that day on Yarnell. The fire shelters weren't able to save any of them. After that tragedy, the U.S. Forest Service, alongside scientists from NASA, spent 5 years trying to create a better shelter. They tested hundreds of different materials and combinations to try to make the design more survivable. But that didn't generate a better product. Firefighters across the country are still carrying this design from 2002. And that's a concern for some as climate change is creating larger, more intense wildfires here in the West.
Hi, I'm Jim Roth.
We traveled to Los Angeles to talk to engineer Jim Roth, a world-renowned fire shelter expert. He says the current shelter is woefully inadequate. The adhesive that holds it together starts breaking down at 500 degrees. But wildfires will burn at ground level at 2,000 degrees.
You ought to trust it to work every single time. And every kind of fuel type, this doesn't make it.
Jim Roth got interested in shelters after this fire in Colorado nearly 30 years ago. In 1994, 14 smoke jumpers working on Storm King Mountain got trapped by fire. They were carrying the original fire shelter design from the 1960s and deployed them in a last-ditch effort to save their lives. None of the 14 made it out. One of the fallen was a 29-year-old smoke jumper from Idaho, known for loving a good laugh, adventure, and people. His name was Roger Roth, the little brother of Jim Roth.
They asked for dental records.
He remembers the moment hearing the news looked dismal.
So, when you're asked to go to the local dentist and get all of his dental records, you know the news isn't going to be good. And here it is, almost 30 years later, but I feel it like it was yesterday.
Before this tragedy, Jim Roth was a full-time aeronautical engineer, but that abruptly changed. That's him in the field in the mid-90s. Just months after his brother's death, he started testing materials. Roth traveled the world gathering data with a completely altered life purpose, building a better shelter.
How did you come to that decision?
How did I come to that decision? I was very, very just angry, just really angry with how could he be taken away at such a young age. I just thought, okay, show me, what do you want? And that's when I realized I can do that.
And he did. Roth designed a shelter that, with direct flames, reached just 73 degrees inside. The Forest Service came up with a shelter that heats up to nearly 134 degrees inside, almost double. In 2002, with both versions on the table, government officials chose the government design.
It ended up being a political decision, and they went with the Forest Service fire shelter design, which is still inadequate. It's not made to handle these environments that we see in wildfires.
The Forest Service wouldn't conduct an interview, but in a statement said their shelter is lighter, easier to handle, and has a tougher outer shell, especially in windy conditions. The current shelter has saved lives. Since 2004, the Forest Service says 61 people have been saved, and shelters have prevented 114 injuries.
Yes, they've saved some lives. Yes, I'm not arguing that. But why are we not having the best?
Jason Ramos is a retired career smoke jumper from Winthrop.
Total crown fire.
This is video Ramos shot on the job. For years, he's advocated for better survival gear. In 2016, he even wrote a book, Smoke Jumper, that was critical of the current shelter's capabilities.
We want to be varsity. Why are you giving firefighters some JV gear? I love the United States, I love the fire service, but we are not where we should be.
Back to Jim Roth's work, he says in 2023, the shelter he developed in the 90s is out of date.
And you'd normally get into it.
New materials mean there's got to be a redesign, and he's committed to making it happen.
That's the only thing left in life that I have to do. And that's getting a fire shelter that's really going to save lives and work in every wildfire.
This is what it looks like when you're inside a bulldozer, trapped by flames in a wildfire burnover, when a wall of fire scorches right over you.
911, your emergency.
I'm in a dozer on Buenaventura up by Lake Avenue. All the windows got blown out.
The dozer operator is desperate and dials 911 from inside his cab.
I can't last too long here.
Okay, sir, I need you to get out of there, okay?
I can't. No, it's all on fire around it.
The frantic call comes during the chaos of what's known as the car fire in Redding, California. It was 5 years ago, and the state of California had never seen anything like it. 170-mile-per-hour winds, creating a fire tornado.
I don't know how long it can last.
We're going to get someone out there as soon as possible if we can, okay?
Before hanging up, the firefighter asked the 911 operator to call his wife.
Can I give you my wife's phone number? Tell her I love her.
Telescope?
This is that dozer operator today, Don Andrews, alongside his wife and grandkids. Don made it out of the burnover with barely a scratch on him.
Was there a point where you thought, I'm not getting out of this alive?
Oh, absolutely. I thought I was done for. When I had talked to the 911 operator,
2 firefighters working near Andrews didn't survive. This is a memorial for Fire Inspector Jeremy Stoke, who died in his truck. Don Smith died in his dozer. In that vicious firestorm, Andrews used a piece of safety equipment. The others did not. What are called fire barrier curtains, made of multiple layers of aluminum that Velcro to your windows when you're trapped. The curtains can withstand 2,800 degrees, the same temperature as the very hottest wildfires. In this test in Australia, an engine equipped with curtains is pummeled by direct flames. You can see the burn scars on the outside, but inside, nothing is damaged.
What do you think about those fire curtains?
oh, saved my life. I'm 100% sure.
This is just a sample of where wildland firefighters have died in their trucks, dozers, and excavators, including 3 young men working on the 2015 Twisp River fire here in central Washington. After their brush truck veered off the road, a wall of fire raced over their vehicle. They didn't have fire curtains to deploy.
It was really heartbreaking to have those 3 young men die at such an early age with a product that we've got that could have saved them. And get that into place first.
Jim Roth of Los Angeles is the engineer who's created fire barrier curtains that have worked every single time they've been deployed. The loss of Roth's brother led to the development of his curtains, saving the lives of about 24 firefighters.
Life's precious.
Don Andrews is one of them.
And we're good friends today. It's great to have new friends, right? But particularly friends like that have told me I thought I was going to die, and I got to go home and see my family.
Roth's curtains are installed on engines and dozers all over the world: California, Wisconsin, Texas, in Canada, Australia, and South Africa. But they're not required or commonly used in the state of Washington.
Do you think that the curtain should be mandatory?
Absolutely.
None of the rigs used by the State Department of Natural Resources has fire curtains installed. DNR wouldn't do an interview, but in a statement, officials said they could create a false sense of security and lead certain operators to proceed in unsafe conditions.
I think it's crazy. I think it's just Ludicrous.
To a survivor like Don Andrews, battling a wildfire without curtains is an unnecessary gamble in an already treacherous profession.
It'd be ludicrous to ever even show up on a fire without curtains.
What are your people worth?
Yeah. What are they worth? How easy is it going to be to replace them? But it only takes once to make you a believer.
You've most likely seen this dramatic image on TV before. The Forest Service dropping a bright red spray from an aircraft. It's fire retardant. The Forest Service says it's one of their most important tools to slow the progression of a fast-moving wildfire. But when retardant lands in water, it goes from a tool to a toxin, killing fish like these steelhead in 2009 in a creek in Santa Barbara. Hundreds of juveniles were wiped out by an accidental drop of fire retardant. 2 accidental drops happened here in the Omak Creek on the Colville Indian Reservation. That was 20 years ago. The retardant killed thousands of steelhead, an endangered salmon species.
It's heartbreaking.
Bertus Campbell is a member of the Colville Indian tribe who lives just yards away from Omak Creek, an historical fishing ground for the Colvilles. In 2001 and again in 2003, the Forest Service inadvertently dropped retardant into the water, according to the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife, causing catastrophic environmental harm.
And that's what we're working for, to get all the fish to come back that way, because that's our heritage, and that's what we do. And that's the big thing in our life.
And so when you hear about a fish kill by a government agency,
it's sad.
The Forest Service invented fire retardant in the 1950s and for 70 years kept quiet about how often it was getting dumped into water and killing fish. Other polluters, like businesses, cities, and counties, have to report what and how much pollution they're putting into waterways. And federal law, the Clean Water Act, mandates they get an EPA permit to do so, to make sure they're not hurting wildlife. But not the Forest Service. For years, they argued they don't need a permit. In 2011, they told the public and the EPA they keep a 300-foot buffer zone around rivers and lakes that ensures retardant wouldn't be discharged into water, so a permit isn't required.
They look at this firefighting as a war where it doesn't matter how much collateral damage they cause.
Andy Stahl is executive director of a nonprofit that sued the Forest Service last year for allegedly violating the Clean Water Act. It turns out a 300-foot buffer zone isn't always cutting it. Legal action a decade ago forced the Forest Service to start tracking how often their drops miss the target. And last year, they reported those numbers for the first time ever.
I was blown away that the Forest Service's error rate was so high.
From 2012 to 2019, they dropped retardant into or near water 459 times, totaling 760,000 gallons. We found that includes 45 drops in the Northwest, including waterways in the Okanagan-Wenatchee and Gifford-Pinchot National Forests.
And here we've got the agency charged with protecting that water actually being the biggest polluter of the water out there.
We are incredibly careful and precise in our use of fire retardant.
In March, the Forest Service deputy chief testified in a congressional hearing that retardant is key for their success in fighting wildfires.
The use of fire retardant is a critical wildfire suppression tool that we will continue to use appropriately and widely to protect communities from the threats of wildfire.
To look into alternatives for those toxic chemicals, we traveled to Chico, California to meet a team who's researched and developed possible options, a company called Green Fire. In August, the Chico Fire Department demonstrated how they use their products. It's the only fire suppression line listed as meeting USDA standards for being safe enough to even use near food production.
We know we have a product with great efficacy that does not harm the environment.
In 2021, the Green Fire founders got a meeting with the Forest Service top brass to talk about trying out non-toxic alternatives. What was the response?
Not much of a response at all. It was pretty much dismissed from the beginning.
It's unclear why the agency wouldn't discuss another option, one that wouldn't kill steelhead and salmon already on the brink of extinction. We do know use of the current formula is going up. Federal records show in 2012, the Forest Service dropped 8 million gallons of retardant on wildfires. In 2020, the amount shot up to 21 million gallons.
Water is so precious. We hear about it constantly on the West Coast. So you'd think you would take every measure to protect that for the future.
This spring, a federal judge ruled that yes, the Forest Service is breaking the law, violating the Clean Water Act, and the agency needs to get a permit. But that could take up to 3 years. In the meantime, the court is allowing them to keep using retardant.
Everything that they throw in the river or the creek is not good for them.
People like Vertus Campbell from Omak hope, while doing so, the Forest Service thinks about them.
It's been hard.
And their water.
How would you summarize what salmon and salmon species like steelhead mean to you and mean to other members of the Colville tribe?
It's like life. I mean, that's what brings life to us. Every stream on this reservation is very important. That's our life.